So they invited me to the White House again, and I went again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 58 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about growing your own coffee. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. It's a very nice day outside today, at least here for me, anyways, but I'm staying inside. I think I'm going to go for a walk once I'm done working on this here. But it's kind of weird now at this point. So for me, I have been kind of inside my house, not really doing anything or interacting for the last couple months, and it feels like, are we going to get to an end of this, or what is going to happen? And where I'm living here in Alberta, we're slowly starting to see some things open up again and being able to interact with people. We went over to my in-laws last night because it was my mother-in-law's birthday, so we went there to have some cake and stuff, and that was kind of like the first step, I feel, of getting close to living normal lives again, right? And we're getting there. And the next step, I just can't wait for movie theaters to be open again. That's what I want more than anything else right now, is just to go watch a movie. And you know who else is really championing this? I don't really like to talk about news and stuff, but I think this is a little bit important. But Christopher Nolan, his new movie Tenet is scheduled to release in the summer sometime, and he is actually really doing everything within his power to get theaters open again so that people can go see his movie in theaters when it was originally scheduled to release. I think it was in June or July, I think. But he is just working hard. He wants people to watch his movie when he wants them to watch it. I guess the realities of the pandemic don't affect him, so he just needs people to go watch his movie when he says to go watch it. So great for you, Christopher Nolan. I think it maybe comes from a point of selfishness or pride, not pushing your movie back, but you know what? If it means I get to go watch Tenet and other movies in theaters, then I'm in. That's good. So that was the only real piece of news I wanted to mention. Because, like I said, I don't really do news on this show. I just talk about movies in general or specific topics. And today I have a topic. Today I was going through lists of things in my phone, and I keep lists of movies and things like that. And I came across time travel movies. And I was reading through those, and I was like, you know what? This is worth having a conversation over. So let's talk about time travel in movies. Now, I didn't do like a top 5 best time travel movies. I just wanted to talk about how time travel is used as a plot device and how it works in movies in different ways, and how time travel is used in different movies. And so I've paired up movies that have kind of similar uses of time travel in their movies, and I'll just talk about those really quick. I'm not sure today's going to be a super long episode, and that's fine. I just want to talk about time travel for a little bit because it's fun. I think it's fun. Now, let's get into the first one that I have here. So, this kind of time travel, it's not really traveling through time. It's just time repeating itself, right? And there are a couple of movies here that use this technique. There are other movies as well, but these ones are the most famous, and that is Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow. Now, basically, the premise of Groundhog Day is Bill Murray's character is stuck in an endless loop. He's just living the same day over and over and over again, and he eventually gets out of that loop. It's not really explained how that happens. I think it's because he finds love or something like that. But the movie itself doesn't really explain how he got into this loop or how he got out of it. He's just in this time loop and is like using it to the best of his abilities, right? And he's going around and he's using his knowledge of that day and where everyone is. He teaches himself a language, and he figures out where everyone's going to be at certain times of the day, and he goes and he rescues people, he saves people, he helps give birth, I think. He learns how to play the piano. He just does everything. And if you look up online, there are a bunch of different theories as to how long Bill Murray was stuck on Groundhog Day. And you can find things anywhere from, oh, he was in Groundhog Day for like 9 months. And one thing I saw that he relived the same day for 31 years. So who knows? There's all kinds of different theories. I think the director said it was 10 years. But he does so much stuff. Who knows, right? It's a fun movie, and I really like it a lot. And then Edge of Tomorrow's premise is that there are these aliens invading Earth, and Tom Cruise is a part of the fighting force to get rid of these aliens. And these aliens have this time travel aspect to them and this time travel ability gets transferred to Tom Cruise. And so every time Tom Cruise dies, the day resets. And so he gets to really know the enemy and understand what's going on, and using that ability is how they're able to win the war. So in Edge of Tomorrow, it's a little more explained as to where this ability comes from and why he's reliving the same day over and over. And so both of these movies have this video game style feel to them. Like, oh, you failed at something, you try it again, you try it again, you try it again, you try it again until you win. And that's exactly what these movies are, especially Edge of Tomorrow. It's a very much a video game feel, but at the same time, it doesn't feel super repetitive. And I think when it comes to movies like this that use this style of time travel, what's really important is the editing. Now, I think that Edge of Tomorrow is supremely well edited. I really like the way this movie is edited. I think it's very stylish and it's very clean. And even though you're seeing the same things over and over again, it's edited in different ways so that you see it from different perspectives, and then you're getting a bigger picture of what's actually going on as opposed to just the same exact shot over and over and over again. And Groundhog Day, because he's doing so many different things throughout the movie, I think the editing is not as important, especially because it's a comedy. It doesn't have these like big special effects, or it's not really looking to have this flair to it. So it's edited pretty normally, I would say, pretty roundabout. But Groundhog Day does have some really good shots to it, and it really emphasizes the fact that he's in this same day over and over again. My favorite shot in the movie, it's a slow motion shot of the clock going from 6 o'clock to 6:01. And it's one of those old-fashioned clocks, right? That where the numbers like flip over, like they actually physically move. So you watch it in slow motion go from 6 to 6:01, and then his alarm goes off. Why it doesn't go off at 6, I have no idea. And that's what we have going on here for those movies there. And so I don't know if I really should call it a time travel movie. It uses time in a really unique and interesting way, but they're not actually moving through time. It's just kind of like stuck in a loop. Like in the end of Doctor Strange does this as well, where he's like, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. And he does it again and again and again and again and again. It's kind of like that. Except it's for an entire movie, which I think is really admirable to set out to do, right? If you're wanting to make a movie, you want to do different things throughout it and show us the characters. But what these movies do is they show us the characters in the same situations in slightly different ways, repeatedly. And that's how we see the characters grow and develop and learn. And especially Bill Murray and Tom Cruise's character, at the beginning of their movies, they're not the most likable people. And then by the end of their movies, they're completely different. They've gone through a complete character arc by doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I think that's kind of it for time repeating in movies. I've got another version of time travel here. The next form of time travel that I have is when you go back in time, it creates an alternate reality. Now, this shows up in a couple of different movies. So it's not going back in time and changing the future. It's going back in time, actually kind of just copy and pastes everything that has happened and starts a new thread of reality. And so changing things in the past doesn't change your future. It changes the future of this new reality that you've created by going back in time. Now, a couple of movies do this. Star Trek from 2009 uses this really well, and also Avengers Endgame uses this technique. And I think when it comes to using time travel in movies, I like this technique the best, I feel, because it's hard to kind of unravel and give plot holes because you're going back in time. Now, it's interesting that going back in time creates an alternate reality, and every time you go back in time, it creates an alternate reality. Now, in the case of the 2009 Star Trek, we have Spock and Nero go through the black hole and emerge in this new reality, but also is their past. And branches off into this new reality stream, right? So they don't know what's going to happen. Everything's been changed, everything's been disrupted. They have new lives that they're going to lead out. Everyone in the whole universe because of this. And it's interesting because Nero goes through the wormhole first and he comes out, and then Leonard Nimoy goes through the wormhole and shows up 25 years later. Like, Nero shows up, and then 25 years later is when Leonard Nimoy shows up, or Spock, sorry. So it's interesting that if that's what happened, did both of those time travels create alternate realities? So do we have 3 realities that are happening now? Or because they went through the same wormhole, it's the same reality that they came out of, and the same Nero and Spock that went into the wormhole, although at different times, come out into the same new alternate reality. If you want to think about things like that, it can get really crazy and you start like going all over the place. It's interesting with Avengers Endgame too, when they do the time heist. Now that movie is that's just a crazy movie because it's very clearly divided into 3 sections. You have the post snap and kind of how the world is surviving and moving on, and then Ant-Man shows up, and then you have the time heist, which is the middle chunk of the movie, when they go back in time and they have a lot of fun and they create a whole bunch of new realities. And then you have the last chunk of the movie, which is the final battle of Thanos after all of the time stream stuff. And I think that Avengers Endgame does a really good job of explaining how this time travel works. I've heard a lot of people complain about it online, saying it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense that going back in time creates a new reality so that you can then... So like your past is your past, but now you're creating new futures and new time streams and new realities. It makes sense. And I'm sorry if for you it maybe doesn't make sense, or maybe there's an aspect of it that I'm not thinking of that causes it to not make sense. So maybe I'm just not looking at the whole complete picture. But I think that it makes sense, and I think I understand it. I think it's really well laid out in the scene where War Machine says, like, oh, why don't we just go back in time to when Thanos was a baby and strangle him? And then the Hulk explains that, like, you can't do that because that would change everything for the future of that new reality that you've created. But in your reality, when you go back to it, which maybe that's where things get crazy, is like you can go back in time into these new realities that you've created, but then you get sucked back into your own reality and you keep moving forward in time there. And there's different parts of this movie that explain it in different ways, and you have the scene with Bruce Banner and the Ancient One when he goes back in time, and she shows that it goes off into a stream of darkness if you take one of the Infinity Stones out. So they have to go into these new realities, take the stones, go back into their reality, fix everything, and then go back into these alternate realities and put the stones back. Now that's like a whole extra level of complicatedness, whole extra level. We'll just go with that. It's a whole extra level of things that you have to think about. And I think that the movie does a very good job. You know, really, at the end of the day, these are movies and stories. And if you're like, oh, the time travel doesn't make sense, well, one of the characters flies around with a hammer, and one of the characters is a talking raccoon. So really, should we be nitpicking any of this stuff? I feel like as long as your story is cohesive enough that I'm on board and your story is entertaining and everything makes sense, I think that a few like little minor plot holes don't matter. And maybe that's hypocritical of me to say because I really don't like The Dark Knight Rises, and mostly it's because of that movie's plot holes and how things don't make sense. So I don't know. I want things to make sense, but I also want to enjoy it. Or like I don't believe in turn your brain off movies. Like, oh, it's good if you just don't think about it. No, that's dumb. Why can't a movie be entertaining as well as intelligent? Why can't every movie be that? That's all I want. I want movies to be smart, and I want movies to be entertaining, and I want movies to be engaging. And why can't they be all 3 of those things? There are plenty of movies that are all 3 of those things. And so why do I have to settle for Transformers Revenge of the Fallen when I can watch Captain America Civil War? Why do I have to settle for that? I shouldn't have to, and I won't. I don't want to. I want my movies to be smart, clever, entertaining, engaging. That's what I want. And so when it comes to time travel, it's got to make sense at least on some level. So okay, that's what I'm sticking with then. It's got to make sense at least on some level. Now, this next bit of time travel that I want to talk about, the last kind, it's the most commonly used. This is where time travel sometimes doesn't make sense. And it's probably also where you run into the most plot holes and where things really fall apart. And that's like your generic, you have a single line of time, and if you move back on the timeline, if you go back in time, you change something, it changes the future and has like that butterfly effect, right? And so obviously Back to the Future uses this kind of time travel, and also so does Looper. And I chose those two movies specifically because I think one succeeds where another one doesn't really quite get there. And let's talk specifically about Back to the Future 2, because I feel Back to the Future 2 is where the time travel maybe doesn't work as well as it does in the first one, especially when they go into the future and then Biff steals the time machine, goes back in time, gives himself the book, and then goes back into the future and leaves the car there as if nothing had ever happened. And also, I'm talking about spoilers for a movie that came out in 1989, so I'm sorry if you haven't seen it, but yeah, I'm just talking about it. So Biff takes the book and he goes back in time, gives it to his younger self, so that he can bet on all the sporting events and win and be unfathomably rich, and then goes back into the future and leaves the car. So if Biff went back in time and then came back forward, he would arrive in the affected future where Biff's rich and where he's like living the best life. So if that were the case, then Marty and Doc wouldn't have a time machine to go back to 1985 and see that everything's been changed and then have to fix it. So I feel like with things like that, it really falls apart. I really like the first Back to the Future. I think it's fantastic. It's a wonderful movie. I actually really like the second one as well. It doesn't do a fantastic job of predicting what 2015 looks like. So there's that, I guess. They didn't go as far as 2020, so they don't get to see what we're living in right now. But I still like that movie. And then the third one is fine. It's a fun Western with time travel. But I think the first one is really the most solid and the most cohesive and makes the most sense, especially when you look at the little finer details of everything. Like the mall is called Twin Pines Mall because it stood on what used to be a pine farm called Twin Pines Farm. And when Marty goes into the past, with the DeLorean, he runs over one of the trees. And so instead of Twin Pines, it's just, there's only one now. So when he goes back into 1985, it's not called Twin Pines Mall anymore. It's called Lone Pine Mall. So just little things like that are like the little touches and details that make this movie really good and really strong. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, you absolutely should. You should go check it out. It's one of the important films of the 1980s that I feel really helps define that decade, and one of the most important movies to come out of that decade, I feel. So go check out Back to the Future if you haven't. It's actually on my list of the ultimate movie list for movie buffs. If you haven't listened to those episodes, it's in episode 3, I think, when I talk about Back to the Future. It's a solid movie. But going back to how Back to the Future 2 doesn't really work as well, and that's how I feel Looper really succeeds. Now, Looper is interesting. It's directed by Rian Johnson, who I really admire and respect as a director. I like the movies that he makes. I've always described Looper as the time travel movie for dummies because it's a very easy to understand. It makes sense. You can only go back in time. You cannot move forward. Going back in time is a one-way trip, kind of like in Terminator. Sending people back in time doesn't, it affects the future if they do things, but they only send people back in time to be assassinated, because I guess it's impossible to get away with murder in the future, but it's possible to send someone back in time and then have them be assassinated. So A looper is someone who kills people who are sent back in time. And it's a very good movie. It's kind of dark and kind of edgy, so know that going in. Most people in this dystopian future, they're either assassins or prostitutes. It's kind of those are the only two occupations that exist, it would seem, in this world. And there are also police officers who hunt people down. It's a very good movie, and the way that it does the time travel and shows that the time travel can have effects on the future is when Bruce Willis gets sent back in time and Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays his younger self, and he gets away because he knows that he's about to kill his future self. He's going to die by his own hand, basically. And Bruce Willis gets away, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is trying to get a message sent to him. And so what he does is he carves a message into his own arm, and it shows up on Bruce Willis's arm as a scar, so he can see the message of where he's supposed to go meet up with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and like have a discussion. And it's a really good discussion. And there's a part even in the movie where he's like, if I have to sit here and talk this time travel stuff, like we could talk about it until your brain turns to eggs or something. Like he brushes it off, saying like, oh, like don't get caught up in the minutia of time travel because it doesn't matter. This is the basics of how time travel works, and this is how we're using it, and just go along. And I really like that aspect because it doesn't get caught up in how the time travel affects the future by sending people back in time to be murdered. So maybe it's just because that they use the time travel for that limited use, or just for that one purpose, is why they use the time travel. I think maybe that's why it works a little bit stronger and the story is a little bit tighter. But in any case, like all of these movies are great that I listed here today. Edge of Tomorrow, Groundhog Day, Star Trek, Avengers Endgame, Back to the Future, and Looper. I love all these movies. I think they're all fantastic, and they all have to do with time travel. So those are all the different kinds of time travel that I wanted to talk about today. The time repeating, creating alternate realities when you time travel, and then changing the past changes the future within the same time stream. So hopefully maybe you got something out of this. I don't know if there's anything to get out of it. I was just talking and saying things, and hopefully you enjoyed it. But what I would like to know is, what is your favorite time travel movie? Is it one of these 6 that I mentioned? Is it another one? There's a whole lot of time travel movies out there. Terminator is one. Clock Stoppers is not really a time travel movie, but it's kind of fun. I don't know if you've seen Clock Stoppers, but when I saw it as a kid, I really enjoyed it. So that's what I want to know. What is your favorite time travel movie? Please feel free to let me know. You can reach out on social media. I'm on Twitter at Pottle Nathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. I've got those links in the show notes. You can just scroll and click and find it right there. It's very, very easy. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It really means a lot to me that you sit down with me for half an hour or so, however long, and just we're talking about movies. That's what I love. That's what I like. Hopefully you guys are all staying inside. Hopefully you're all staying safe. And if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.